Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome for participating to the June meeting of the Annapolis Education Commission. I'm Jeff McCrease from Ward 2 in Annapolis. I'm this year's chair of the Annapolis Education Commission. We previously transmitted a meeting agenda, and I'll read it out now. We'll go through some introductions for our participants. We'll do an approval of last month's meeting minutes. We've got one piece of public testimony that I will read from a member of the public. We'll yield to Mr. Bob Mosier and Ms. Jolynn Davis from the school system for an update. And then items for discussion, Ms. Janet Norman, a commissioner, will talk about Annapolis PTA grant opportunities. And then we'll move on to a discussion of transportation improvements. Commissioner Laura Booth has a proposed resolution to discuss. We'll spend the balance of our time reviewing the school year for open discussion. And then we want to decide on the next Annapolis Education Commission meeting date. Our normal meetings are the first Monday of each month, but due to some transition conflict issues, our meeting for June was moved here to the 22nd of June. And then we'll adjourn by 7:30 p.m. Is there anyone that anything that our commissioners want to add to the agenda? Janet Norman.
Jeff, do you have a section? I didn't see it on the agenda of new business.
Review of the school year, but we'll include that to mean new business. So that's added there after review of the school year.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, if you would, just for reasons of decorum here, if you do want to speak, raise your hand, or otherwise use the function there for raise your hand in Zoom, and I'll call on you, and we'll proceed that way. I will get everyone's opinion before I go back to someone else for a second thought. Okay, introductions here. Yes, Jess.
I just want to let you know that Laura's power just flickered and rebooted her internet. So she is coming back on, but she has to wait for her router to come back up.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a storm passing through West Annapolis right now. Okay, so let's go through the roster here and roll and introduce yourself, if you would, starting with Ward 1, Brianna.
Hi, Brianna Griffin, Ward 1 Commissioner.
Okay, and I'm the Ward 2 Commissioner, Jeff McCrease. Ward 3, Enid Collison-Lee.
She's on mute.
Enid, you're on mute if you can hear us. Okay, we'll move on, but Enid is here for the record. Ward 4, Kayla Golder. I don't see her here. Ward 5, Olga Cortez. Not here. Ward 6 is unfilled, although I was speaking with Hillary Raftovich before the meeting, and when the Standing Commission of the City of Annapolis begins to review further applications, Hillary just confirmed that Ava Dubois' application will be looked at and reviewed then for Ward 6. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
She's still rebooting.
Okay, and she is here. Jess Packler, Ward 8.
Here.
Okay, Odessa Ellis, at large.
Present.
Great. Pam Bukowski's our at-large B opening, and Ms. Raftovich said that with Ms. Bukowski's resignation, Ms. Grace Matthews' application will be processed when the standing committee begins to review other applications. Janet Norman, at-large C.
Yes, just question, when is the standing committee anticipated to review those applications?
When they reconvene. TBD.
Okay.
Mr. Ken Starks, at large D. Not here. Our alderperson, Ms. Sheila Finlayson. I don't believe is here. And we have some other elected officials here. Ms. Rodvian?
Hello, I'm here, and I would attend more frequently if we didn't, our meetings didn't happen on the same evening. So I know Yannick Parker is usually here in my presence or in my absence.
Thanks very much for coming, Lisa. We appreciate it. And we have our two finalist candidates for the school board here. Ms. Joanna Tobin?
Here.
Thanks for coming. And Ms. Indy Oakes?
Hi.
And India, we recognize your presence. Thanks for coming. Ms. Jolynn Davis?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Good evening.
Great. Our regional assistant superintendent for the Annapolis cluster, and Mr. Bob Mosier as well.
Good evening, everybody.
Great. Thanks everyone for participating. Next on the agenda is approval of prior minutes, which were distributed via email earlier. Are there any comments, questions, or corrections to the minutes? Janet?
I got a chance to browse through the minutes quickly. Were they just sent out late this afternoon? Is that when they were sent, or were they sent earlier?
Now, the minutes are posted to the same position in Google Documents within 48 hours of all of our meetings.
Where is the Google Documents thing? I don't know where that
I'll
is.
ask Brianna to send that to you separately. If you'd like to put off approval of the minutes until the next meeting, then we can do that.
Whatever the other commissioners feel. I was able to browse through it quickly, but
Okay, well, if there's no objection, we'll put that off until the next meeting. Brianna, if you would please send out by email a hyperlink to where the meeting minutes are posted, and Brianna does a very good job of posting those within 48 hours of our meetings. Okay, we have some public testimony. I'm going to read this verbatim here that just came in a few minutes ago. This note here is from Mr. Rich Cerullo from Annapolis, Maryland, from Carvel Road, who writes, "Hello and good evening. Has the commission heard from Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and is there a detailed plan to safely reopen schools for summer sessions and in the fall of 2020? And does that plan also include transportation for all students and from all neighborhoods? Thank you." So Mr. Mosier, could we turn this over to you
Sure.
for further information, please?
So as the superintendent briefed the board recently, we have formed 14 working committees to examine the myriad issues that are related to opening school in the fall. Basically, there are three options, right? Everybody goes back, nobody goes back, or some hybrid. And the hybrid has, as I was saying to Jeff before the meeting, right, 100 different tentacles to it. And so we're looking at everything from academics to equity to technology to transportation to health and safety to security, all of those things and more. Superintendent has said that we expect to have a decision by late July. We are like other school systems, paying attention to the conditions and the guidelines that the governor and the state superintendent continue to put out and update. We are very cognizant that we need to have input from our families, and so either later tonight or tomorrow we will launch a family survey online, which will be available in English and Spanish, and we'll push all that information out to families by phone call and email and text message. And so that will ask about a lot of the subjects that I just talked about. And so as we try to better define the needs and the wishes, right? Because let's just say we have a hybrid situation, we're going to have parents who are comfortable sending their kids back. We're going to have parents who aren't comfortable sending their kids back. We're going to have teachers and staff who are comfortable going back and some who aren't comfortable going back. And so those are some of the tentacles that we are working through at the moment.
Thank you very much. Ms. Davis, do you have anything to add?
Nope. I think Bob did a great job. It is certainly a challenge planning for these three options. And I have the pleasure of serving on the equity subcommittee. And we're really looking at, I have the lens of our students in Annapolis in my mind and on my heart as we're examining all of these options.
All right. While you have the floor, Mr. Mosier, Ms. Davis, do you have anything else to bring to the attention of the cluster or its assembled viewers here?
Before we move from that, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I would like to know who from the Annapolis cluster is on each of the 14 subcommittees. I definitely would like to make sure that our PTA and PTSA members are fully informed of the discussions and deliberations and input. So do we contact Dr. McMahon to
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen.
to offer that we would like to be on the thing? I'm going to be the incoming PTA president for Annapolis High, and I would really like to get a lot of transparency for our members to participate.
So let me get you a list of those folks. There is a website that I failed to mention in what I was saying before. And it's aacps.org/fall2020, which has, you can find a listing of all of the, not only all the committees, but the resources that they're using and going through, but I'll get that and get it to you, Janet.
Okay, I've seen you pushed that out somewhere, and I saw the listing of the committee name, but I have not seen any way that parents and public get on those committees to participate.
Yeah, I'll get it to you.
Okay, I guess you'll.
Yep. Can I say something? Can I ask a question?
Sure, Odessa.
Okay. I heard Ms. Davis talk about all these different committees. With all the talk about the equity and opportunity gaps, I haven't really heard much information given about how they plan to deal with the opportunity gap, the achievement gap, especially with the African-American males with the suspensions and expulsions. Are there going to be any more changes or any more policies coming forth about how we can better deal with this opportunity gap?
So, hi, Odessa, how are you? I don't know that we're currently looking at any policy. Bob can correct me if I'm wrong. What I can tell you is that equity is truly at the forefront of our decision-making when it comes to the reopening of school. We are looking at, I can speak to my subcommittee's specific charge. School has to look different, right? And we have to provide our teachers, our educators who are with our children, the skills they need to help our students process everything that's been going on in our world. We are examining what roles social justice plays, and there's so much to it. I can tell you it truly is at the forefront of our decision making. It's not, oh, let's look at this. Oh yeah, and don't forget about equity. It is at the heart of our decision making right now. I can tell you, Ms. Ellis, I in fact just this afternoon have been scrubbing some data files around disproportionality specific to African-American students around suspension and referral data countywide. We've also been looking at the spread of park performance, of course that's a year old, countywide. Where do we have schools that have more African-American students scoring at 4s and 5s as we're looking at restructuring the EOC process for next year and determining how to best support schools with the largest gaps, specifically for African-American students. So it is at the front of our work. I don't know if that fully answers your question because it's not just one thing, but I can tell you that capacity building for our leaders and our teachers is primary.
I think because there's been so much discussion about education with this, the incidents, the events that has been unfolding for the last couple of months or last couple of weeks, the Floyd, George Floyd incidents and the other one in Atlanta, Georgia. So a lot of people are coming on and they're speaking about education, education, along with health disparities and other things. So I'm just saying it's time, it would be a good time for Anne Arundel County Public Schools to start looking at deeply more about these suspensions, expulsions, and these, especially the students in the elementary school, because by the time they get to middle school, they pretty much have been tracked to be dropouts. So I'm hoping that Anne Arundel County Public Schools will join in with other areas, other schools, and look into this education piece, especially for the African American male.
100%. I can tell you that our superintendent is committed to this work. I am committed to this work. I couldn't agree more. It is beyond time, and I appreciate your comments, Odessa. Thank you.
Mhm.
Jess, and then Enid.
Thank you.
Jess, you're still muted.
So I have two questions. The first one is how were, having looked at the fall 2020 steering committees, it said that the planning committees are composed of employees, ACPS employees, students, parents, bargaining unit members, etc., including community organization and community partners. How were those committee members chosen? And was that a transparent process? Can that be, shown anywhere where how the people that are involved in these committees were chosen? Is the first question that I have.
I don't have that answer for you, Jess. I can get it for you. I wasn't involved in that, but let me get it for you. I don't want to hazard a guess
Okay.
and tell you wrong, but I'll get it back through Jeff to circulate to you.
Okay.
Sure.
And then the second question follows along what Odessa was saying about equity. A number of the PTAs in the Annapolis cluster recently signed a letter supported a letter that was sent to Dr. Arlotto and the Board of Education regarding equity and the lack of equity in terms of technology access and wireless access and a number of things regarding technology. We haven't heard anything back. There's been no response to that letter that was sent. And but I just want to know, I am extremely concerned because the last 3.5 months have been incredibly inequitable for our students, our most vulnerable students, especially when it comes to technology and access. And I want to make sure that the failings and faults that happened in the spring do not happen in whatever the fall looks like. And I'm very concerned about that and how because I think it disproportionately affects the Annapolis cluster, since we have the largest, if not one of the largest clusters of children living in poverty and living with challenges. So I'd like to know more about what the plans are to solve the problems that arose in the spring and have not yet been solved, as far as I can tell.
So maybe I'll start, Jess, if that's okay, and Bob can tag along. I am not part of the specifics as far as technology distribution and Wi-Fi access and what exactly that will look like. What I can tell you is over the past, I don't know, a couple months, each principal was tasked with determining exactly who didn't have access and why that was. So to the point where Jess Packler's kids are not on because they don't have Wi-Fi, and why don't they have Wi-Fi, and what would be helpful for her family, right? So really specifics per family, so that Dr. Gillen's office in partnership with some community organizations are looking at deploying hotspots and other creative solutions. We have some businesses that are willing to contribute funds to pay if paying the fee. I know it was free, and then is the issue that they were had defaulted on bills or something like that. What was the root cause of them not being connected, so that we can then put in place something to fix it? Sometimes we jump to making assumptions about why. So we had to figure out exactly why it was, and then we can put in place a solution. So Dr. Gillen's office is taking the lead on that connectedness piece, not necessarily the device piece, but the connectedness piece. While we started giving out one device to families at the beginning of our shutdown, we were able to increase that for Title I schools specifically in partnership with the Title I office and get out substantially more devices as the spring progressed, again, to Title I schools with more than one child in the cluster. And so we ran a report, how many kids lived at a specific address, and then used the Title I elementary schools as the vehicle. So if you had 3 kids at Annapolis High School and 1 at Eastport, the device would have been given out through Eastport, as our high schools are not Title I schools. So we did increase that, and I know the plan is to continue to increase devices for students in the fall. I know that I just can't speak to the specifics. I don't know if, Bob, you might be able to contribute a little more to that.
Sure, I can pick it up there. And I was looking for a document that has the number in it, and I wasn't able to find it when you finished. But I know that we have recently received a shipment of, I want to say, 12,000 Chromebooks, which we are now programming and preparing for students. And then there are orders in place for tens of thousands more. I mean, the superintendent has said that the goal by some point in the fall, pardon me, I don't know that we'll get there by Labor Day, but by some point in the fall is to be one-to-one. Now, I would ask you all to understand that one-to-one with 85,000 students means you need more than 85,000 computers, right? Because when those students leave their computer at home, or we have park testing, or we have whatever else, you need to have more computers than that. So that certainly is the goal. Jolene has talked about the access piece. I would say to you that we're doing what we can in the access piece, in the Wi-Fi piece, but we're not Wi-Fi installers, right? We're not cable installers. And so we've had conversations with the city, we've had conversations with the county, we've had conversations with private industry about how they can help in that. And that certainly is an issue that will carry on going forward. But as Jolene said, we're trying to do what we can there.
So I just had a quick follow-up on 2 things. Will any of these solutions be in place for the summer schools that are being set up for the Title I schools and the Title I students, so that they can try to make up for the loss of learning that they've had over the last 3 months? I think those schools start right after July 4th, if not next week, maybe. And then secondly, for families who have, from what I was told at Eastport, it was for family, the Title I was for families with 2+ children, not 1+ children.
Correct.
So for families that have 2+ children in middle school and high school, so they have 4 kids, 2 kids at Annapolis Middle and 2 kids at Annapolis High, but they are what would have been considered Title I families. Did those families not get additional devices because they're not at a Title I school?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can't tell you how many. What I can tell you is any of the reason we were using Title I, it had to do with funding, right? Ultimately funding for the devices and availability of devices. There were countless families at both Annapolis and Bates who were given more than 1 device. In the end, if you needed the device, we figured out a way to get you the device, right? So, well, we didn't have a specific structure. I want to say, somebody ran the report for me. We had a handful of families. What we were aiming at is a 2-to-1 this spring for Title I. But again, based on the availability of the devices and who owns them and purchased them, that's why we went through Title I. So Jess, any family who said, look, we're struggling using 1 device with these 3 or 4 kids, it really didn't matter where they went to school, we were going to get them another device what in the end, right? So we tried our very best to make it work with what we had available to us. I don't know, I can't speak to the, I know Dr. Gillen's team was working on the Wi-Fi stuff and has been for quite some time. I can't tell you with any level of certainty that'll be in place, but I can certainly follow up on that. One thing that is interesting to note is that not everybody without Wi-Fi wants Wi-Fi, right? So that's also something to consider. Not every family that said we can't get online is receptive to a hotspot in their home, right? So that is also something to consider when we're looking at that. So I think more of our struggle with access, it was less about the Wi-Fi and the device and more about the capacity of every adult to hold their kid accountable and to get their kid online and to support navigating getting them online, right? That was actually more of the struggle than the actual device itself. It doesn't mean that's not still a struggle, it certainly is. So I will get back to you though regarding the Title I piece and when we plan to get kids online, okay?
Okay, Enid, you're next, and then Joanna.
I'm sorry, I missed the name of the individual who sent the letter to you, and I also did not get an agenda. I don't know, I had to get a new router and everything, Jeff, so who was that person, or are they a parent or what?
Yeah, the city of Annapolis has invested in a new manner for the public to send in comments. And it's Mr. Cerullo.
Can you tell us how people get those comments into the city? Anybody from the city?
Hillary, are you able to answer that question?
Yes, we put a link on the agendas for every meeting that give people access to a form for that particular board or commission. And then they can fill out that form and it's automatically sent to the chairperson and the staff liaison of that committee.
Okay, Enid, does that answer your question?
Okay, yes, it does.
Okay, Joanna.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So when the schools shut down, and I guess this goes again to Bob and Jolyn, when the schools shut down and you did the survey, the tech survey for families, are there plans in place to automatically take in that information as part of registration information? Because now we know, as we said, we could have a hybrid situation going forward. And to your point, Jolyn, about, different families' capacities or even preferences in some cases, are there plans for that information to be a part of registration? So so the schools can have from the get-go that knowledge, quite frankly, for each kid.
So I'll take that, Joanna. So whether it's integrated with the student information system, I can't answer for you, but I do know that the system we are collecting that data and are able to parse it out as that may be to use in things like that, right? So for example, one question in the survey that'll go out tonight or tomorrow is, what school was your child last year? What school is your child going to be next year, right? Because you may go from Eastport Elementary to, I don't know, Central Middle, right? I mean, that's a possibility if you're in STEM. Right. So that kind of stuff, if that answers your question. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Janet.
I was just going to ask Bob if the survey could also include, do you intend to use the bus?
It does.
It does. Okay.
Yeah.
You know how that's being worded?
I didn't memorize it when I looked at it a few hours ago. But I mean, here's the let me see if I can do this with the intent of it, right? So the intent is to gauge or have parents tell or have families tell us, right? I'm likely to use the bus. I'm not likely to use the bus. I always transport my children. I never transport my children, right? To use those examples. Same with meals, right? If we're going to serve meals in the classroom, for example, or meals in the cafeteria, and how comfortable are you with that? Those kinds of things, if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, just to gauge potential ridership. I know lots of places in Wisconsin routinely every year to assess their ridership.
Right. So they are not yes, no questions, right? They are sort of graded answer questions, so to speak.
Right, thank you.
Okay, Jess, you've got the last question here.
So I just, in terms of that, I just want to make sure that you also, when you're doing the survey, make sure in the original survey that came out, it just asked if you had a device that accessed the internet. And it became clear over the last 3 months that you can't just use any device to access the internet. Even an iPad doesn't work well in Google Classrooms. You really need a Google Chromebook in order to do the e-learning as AACPS has it set up well. But the question that I have is, I don't see anything specific, and maybe it's hidden down within one of the working committees, but about the problem with our English language learners, which was another part of the petition that we had put forward, in that none of the educational instruction was provided in Spanish. None of the videos were translated. Google Classrooms does not easily translate things. So particularly for our younger learners who require their parents to, I have a kindergartner and a second grader, so I know, how much time a parent has to be spending explaining what they're supposed to do and teaching the kids what to do and, reading the instructions and telling them. And so for our younger students whose parents don't speak English, there was really no way for them to do that. And we clearly have never had enough bilingual facilitators to facilitate in a regular, classroom environment. And I know from speaking with multiple families that this was a big issue. The fact that, it's always an issue. Power School is not translated into Spanish. Google Classroom does not, but also the videos that came out that said, this is how you do this, none of that was translated into Spanish. And so what are the plans to fix that issue?
So, Jess, the current coordinator of English language acquisition is on the academics team. And we have a bilingual facilitator and an ESOL teacher on the equity team. I don't know that the plan is fully fleshed out yet, right? So we're still in the investigation consideration mode. I can tell you on my committee, English language learners are a prime part of our discussion. It is very different. Understand though, keep in mind that in the classroom, instruction isn't in Spanish, right? I think what our English language learners miss most is exposure to English speaking peers, right? That's how they learn the language, is by being immersed in that. And so they are missing out, right? Being without that all day. But it is something that I know is at the forefront of the discussion of both the academics team and the equity team.
Okay, thanks. Because yes, you're right. The instruction is not in Spanish in the classroom, but the teachers know what they're instructing. Whereas the problem here is that if you have a kindergarten parent, they don't know what they're instructing and there's not one-on-one teaching happening. So it's completely different than having English language instruction in the classroom, because the parents can't understand what they're supposed to be teaching because it's not in Spanish.
And it's interesting, some of our coolest stories, I'll say, come from our schools where we have many English learners, right? And we have teachers who are meeting with kids one-on-one, nonstop, to try to support them in working through the issues in Google Classroom. We have teachers who have been FaceTiming with families and bilingual facilitators. I don't know if anyone's worked harder than them since March 13th. They have just been unreal, but it does take one-on-one hands-on support, and it's hard when you don't have that ability to be hands-on, right next to the kid or the family. But point well taken, Jess. It's certainly something that we need to continue to work to do better at.
Okay, so Ms. Jolene Davis and Mr. Bob Mosier, both from the Anne Arundel County Public School System, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Let's move on to the next item on our agenda. I have withdrawn a draft resolution concerning student resource officers, since it doesn't appear that is going to come before the school board in the future, which means the next item is the Annapolis PTA grant opportunities, and Ms. Janet Norman. Janet.
Sure. I hope people got a chance to see what I sent around in the email. I wanted to let you know that the National PTA has these COVID-related grants for $5,000 to local PTA organizations and $15,000 to our district PTA, which I'm hoping I can get a hold of Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs to apply for. Unfortunately, in our cluster, it might be that it just builds upon the resources that suburban schools have and we don't, without the capacity of functional PTAs at all of our schools. So I'd like to know from people in the room which of our schools, don't have a functional PTA that as of July 1st that can take over and apply for these grants. They're a very short justification, like 500 characters. Tell us what you'd like to do with $5,000 in the areas of, you could choose food security, you could choose emotional, mental health and well-being, you could choose device access or e-learning. So I would love to get your input as to what Annapolis High PTSA should apply for, because I'm going to be doing the grant application. I would love to know what the other schools in our cluster are going to be doing, such that we don't have 7 schools applying for food security and nobody applying for mental health supports, things like that. So if we could coordinate a little bit, that would be preferable. But I really would like to know who can step in and help create functional PTAs for our high poverty schools that may not have them at the moment. The other good thing coming is that those who apply for this grant, which is due by the 12th, but in my mind, I'm telling myself it's due by the 10th, is that there's a second round for another $5,000 in the spring. So this grant would be handed out by August 5th and money to be spent by December 11th. And then those who got the grant have another shot at another $5K. Since Annapolis High PTA's entire budget for the school year is $9,000, and our sister high schools of Broadneck, South River, and all raise in the area of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. This money is important, and I hope we can have it go to the most beneficial usage. So if anyone, I would love to get your ideas and input, and you can send any ideas to ahptsainfo.com, and I'll write that in the chat box. Or you can send it to me personally, jannorman12@gmail.com.
I can say that the Annapolis Middle School PTSA and the Eastwood Elementary School PTSA are both looking at this. And additionally, I've sent it to Georgetown East. I have not heard back from them, but I will follow up with Georgetown East. They have one person and then some administrators as their PTA. I know Mills Parole does not have a functional PTA at this time.
I sent it to the principal and vice principal of Mills Parole, approximately the last day of school. So I'm sure they were busy with many other things, but I have not heard back from, I think I sent it to Germantown Elementary principals, Tyler Heights. I have not heard back from anybody, any administrators regarding this or contacts to their PTAs. So I hate to turn down free money like this.
All right, any other comments on PTA grant opportunities for Janet and for the betterment of the group?
I'll just add, Janet, I am aware that Annapolis Elementary School is working through the application. They're well aware and working with their principal on that.
Okay, do you know who the incoming PTA president is for July 1st?
I know who the I don't know. I don't want to assume it's the same PTA president. It was Sarah Oliver is the PTA president that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Okay.
Janet, I have her contact information and can put you in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Janet, I also know at least the PTA president from this previous year at Bates, Ray Feldman. I can get in touch with him.
Yeah, if you could,
Okay.
please. I think I sent it to him, but if you could follow up with him,
Okay.
that would be great. I sent it to Hillsmere, I sent it to a lot of people.
Mills
right,
Perot. I'm sorry, Jeff, I just wanted to add, when she said that Mills Perot did not have a functioning PTA, I had talked to Mr. Simley early when we were all going to have meetings, and it was my turn to have a meeting. And they had initiated, there was a group that was meeting that particular month that I talked with him. So I'm going to check and see if they do, because I think they do have a PTA now.
I spoke with them 2 weeks ago and they did not have a PTA.
And did you speak to Mr. Simley?
I spoke to the school secretary.
Oh. Okay.
And maybe it's a need for some community members to step up and serve some, minimal functional role within the PTA. You don't have to be a parent of a student, maybe we could elicit some people to serve as a minimum functioning PTA for our high need schools.
Okay, if anyone has any additional information on grant opportunities or volunteer to help work up some grant applications, please see Janet Norman. Next item on the agenda, there are 3 people connected to Janet Norman and Laura Booth, and Jess Packler earlier pre-COVID had volunteered to serve as a subcommittee chair for transportation issues. So the issue has to do with transportation. And Laura, I'd like to turn it over to you for background, and then Janet and Jess, you can add what you want, and you have a draft resolution for consideration here. Laura, to you.
Thank you. The budget as approved by the Board of Ed originally, after all the budget hearings and things, included funds for 7 new positions in our transportation department, which would have helped greatly with a lot of the issues that we see here in the Annapolis cluster. Basically, it's an equity issue. Any of the transportation problems, a lot of the transportation problems that we have, buses not running on schedule, things like that, are things that parents who have 2 parents and 2 or more cars in the household, in a middle or upper class household, can compensate for. So, if the bus is early and leaves the bus stop early and my kid misses it, he comes home and says, "No, the bus left early." And we say, "Okay, fine, whatever, let me get my keys." In our families here in our cluster, we've heard how many meetings? I mean, almost every meeting this year, there have been issues with regard to transportation where families are saying, my kid has to walk through an area that isn't safe, or, we've got a lot of kids that are taking city buses to get to and from school because the transportation department just hasn't responded to their issues. We had the transportation report that came out this spring, and there were so many issues in there that, that were marked as things that needed to be fixed. And so there were 7 new positions that were supposed to be in the budget that were supposed to be filled to help, especially now that we're going into such such a harder situation in the fall. And at the last minute, I think it was Wednesday's Board of Ed meeting, the board voted to remove that funding and spend that money on mental health counselors for the schools, which, we're not saying that isn't valid, but it sets up a sort of a false saying, well, we can't offer you physical safety, health and safety, but but you have to choose. If you want mental health, you can't have physical health and safety. And again, the people that are hit most disproportionately by this are families. People the children that are living in poverty, that are we're seeing issues with absenteeism. Almost every principal in the cluster has mentioned that's an issue. So taking the funding away from the transportation department at this point seems like of all the things in the budget right now, that's something where we really ought to be spending the money. So the resolution, which I sent out, that I wrote, but we can certainly rewrite. And India, give me a second, because I will address your comment as well. but I'll read this off to you, and I can post the whole text in the comments as well, so that in the chat, so that you can read it. But the Annapolis Education Commission requests that the City Council not move money dedicated for transportation
Council.
positions. Sorry. Yes, because it's already, the Board of Ed already voted on this. Now the vote is up to the county council on whether or not, and Lisa can speak about this too, about whether or not to move those funds after the Board of Ed has already voted on that. So actually, Lisa, if you have something, if you want to shed light on how that works, that would be great. Unmute.
My apologies. As soon as you asked me a question, my phone started ringing and I was trying to reach for the mute button at the same time. So what will happen at the council is if the council takes no action, the Board of Education's budget will request to move the money from one state category, which I believe is instructional salaries, or excuse me, from transportation to instructional salaries. It will automatically go into effect, sort of like, you know, the president doesn't sign a bill and it goes into effect. So that is one possibility. The other possibility is that the county council passes a resolution rejecting the request to move the funds from transportation to instructional salaries. And I have already requested that resolution be drafted. So, things are preliminary, but it should be introduced on July 6th. And, obviously, like you said, we're not, of course, no one wants to reject the idea of additional mental health support for students, but it shouldn't be, like I said, it shouldn't be an either. So I beg of the Board of Education to look at mental health positions. I'm pursuing outside possibilities. I'm not sure what those possibilities might be, but I'm looking at anything and everything so we could possibly fund both. It's going to be a tough battle because no one likes to vote against mental health. And that's, I think that's where I think it is. And so we have to make a very strong case that this is really about, like you said, physical health and safety, with kids tripled up and sitting on the seats and in the aisles, and kids stranded when their bus doesn't show up, or kids having to walk through unsafe neighborhoods. And we have stories that illustrate all of these things. Really helpful in kind of explaining to the council members why this is so important and why we should do everything we can to fund both.
That would be great. That would be the best outcome. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. And Laura, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and copy and paste that and put it in the chat function.
Sure.
Janet, over to you, since you were one of the other commenters on this subject, please.
Can I pass it? Sorry, can I pass it to Jess or?
Okay, Jess, do you have anything to add?
Just a sec.
I just wanted to on the side, Jolene, you just said that you confirm with Mills Parole. I have a message from May 28th, speaking with it was the librarian, not the school secretary. I'm the librarian. We do not currently have a PTA at the moment, and the principal is the best contact. So there's clearly some confusion there, but that's what the librarian at Mills Parole told me on May 28th. So
Jess, it's very possible that the librarian was not aware. They had literally one meeting right before the shutdown. If you recall, Mr. Assembly took over right after the holidays in January and was working with parents, was able to put together a team, had them work with the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs and get some training. They literally did everything except set up the bank account, and then we had the shutdown. So there is still work to be done to continue that momentum. And it's quite possible that she was not aware of that since they only had one meeting. But
so regarding the transportation issue, I think what Lisa said is true. You don't want to take money away from mental health, especially after everything that we've been going through. But the report that came out earlier this year or last year was damning in regards to our transportation department. And there are so many issues, and so many of those issues disproportionately affect the children in our cluster. And it just shouldn't be an either or. As the letter from Teresa Sutherland said today, this is 6/100ths of the budget. There should be a way for Anne Arundel County Public Schools to find a way to fund these $675,000 for these mental health counselors, and also fund the transportation that is so direly needed. I mean, I sit right here on the edge of the Annapolis Middle School line every single day, and I can tell you, the number of children who don't make it to school when the weather is bad, or if the bus is late. There are just so many different issues that we have with overcrowded school buses. One in particular, which we have talked about multiple times in our meetings in the past and was brought to the school system with no resolution, was the fact that the bus that takes children from Eastport to Bates, students from Eastport to Bates, which is all the PBA magnet students as well as the special ed education students, the way the schedule was set up, they never arrived at Bates on time throughout the entire school year until school closed down. They did not arrive on time, and that was by function of the way the schedule. There are clearly a number of issues that need to be, and we cannot wait. Our students can't wait, especially if we're going to have to start looking at how to minimize, do social distancing and smaller number of people. We need these people to be using the transportation software functionally. It is very clear from the transportation report that the current staff is not able to do that. And we need those 7 people so that they can do that, and so that they can take care of their kids, because it's also a mental health issue. And we're going to need, it's all part of it. So
and coming into this fall with the social distancing, I mean, overcrowding on buses was a problem, but overcrowding on buses in the time of COVID becomes physically endangering children. I mean, you are forcing kids, you cannot sit 4 kids to a seat, in a time of social distancing.
Exactly.
Okay, I see the hands up here. Before we acknowledge them, we have a resolution on the floor that's been put there. Could I get a second, please?
Jeff, could I just add my piece?
Not yet. We've got a motion that's been submitted. Is there a second on that motion?
I second the motion.
Second motion. Okay, we're up for discussion on the motion here. Janet.
I just wanted to add, sorry, I was busy adding some materials to the chat box. And I hope everyone can go down and click the link so that you can see the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen and have access to that and what other people add in. I just wanted to say that for the positions listed, I don't know what a school climate counselor is. I pretty much anticipate it's not coming to Annapolis High School because we probably don't have the climate difficulties that some other schools have. I know that Annapolis High has been blessed previously to receive additional high school counselors when we went from 5 high school counselors to 7 in the 2019 to 2020 school year. So I don't know where those additional bodies are going to go, but it's highly unlikely that they're coming to the Annapolis cluster in any great numbers. So I still see that the needs of the approximately 56,000 students who rode the bus prior to COVID and likely will again after COVID and more need to be taken care of. I would also ask that we could urge the school district to see if we can not do procedures as usual. Maybe we don't need to advertise the positions for 3 months before filling them. If there are college grads out there who are looking for jobs and have GIS skills, maybe we can do a 1.5 month, a 30-day advertisement and turn things around quicker, because we need to move on this urgently and not with the same procedures of the past. So thank you.
Okay, discussion here is on Laura's resolution concerning the budget move away from transportation. Laura?
India, I just wanted to say, I definitely got your point about health and safety. I worked it in a little bit lower, simply because I really think it's important at the top to make the point that this is an equity issue. It is also a health and safety issue, but in this particular climate, I think we need to be, just like we don't want to say no to mental health, I think we also need to be very careful about saying no to something that would proportionally help more of our students living in poverty and our minority students. And that's really what this is about. It's about putting something in place that will benefit the students who are disproportionately affected by transportation problems, which is primarily our poor and our minority students. So what I did was I put that at the bottom. I said we agree that additional mental health. Let me read the whole thing from the top just so that you have it. The Annapolis Education Commission requests that the County Council not move money dedicated for transportation positions to any other part of the budget. As the AACPS transportation report clearly indicated, there are serious problems within this department that must be fixed. Transportation issues remain an equity issue that disproportionately affects our most vulnerable students and contributes to the inequalities within our school system. It is the responsibility of the school system and the Board of Education to support our students both mentally and physically. We agree that additional mental health support is needed, but it should not come at the expense of health and safety and of fixing our transportation issues and making sure that education is physically and safely accessible to all AACPS students. In addition, we do not believe that a major funding shift such as this should occur after the public hearings and budget discussions have been completed.
Further discussion, Joanna?
Yeah, I think there's a point that there may be a way to work into this that I think is critical, which is part of the reason for those 7 transportation positions was actually to enact efficiencies in the transportation department, not just for the primary, obviously the fact that we need better transportation, but potentially, according to the Prismatic report, savings if that software was actually used the way it should be and various other things. So this is also about, especially in a time of real fiscal contraction, managing the resources that are available in the best possible way so that actually the savings that were calculated by Prismatics would more than pay for the number of mental health positions that are being proposed here. So that just adds to the fact that this is a false choice to a certain extent.
Lisa, I saw you nodding. Thank you.
Further discussion on the transportation issue of Laura's proposed resolution. Well, if there is none, we can go to a vote on the resolution. Brianna, are you standing by? Okay. The resolution is posted. Does anyone need it read to them again? Okay, let's call the roll. Ward 1, Brianna, yes is affirming and approving the resolution as drafted. The no is negative.
Yes.
Ward 1, yes. Ward 2 is me, yes. Ward 3, Enid Collison-Lee.
Yes.
Ward 4, Kayla Golder is not here. Ward 5, Olga Cortez not here. Ward 6, Kim Sharps not filled. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
Yes.
Ward 8, Jess Packler.
Yes.
At large A, Odessa Ellis.
Yes.
At large B, Pam Bukowski, by virtue of there being no replacement, you still have a vote if you'd like to cast one.
She's on mute. She's on mute.
Okay, we'll pass. At large C, Janet Norman.
Yes.
And at large D, Ken Starks is not here right now.
Sam just unmuted.
Okay, I unmuted. I also vote yes.
Yes, okay. We have a quorum and it's unanimous that that vote passes. Okay, thank you, Laura. And
Thank
you
you.
know, the first half of our year's deliberations pre-COVID was dominated by transportation issues. So, Lisa, for your edification, if you haven't already gotten it from the tenor of this conversation, the transportation issue really has been a very, very important one here in this cluster for a number of different reasons. As Laura said, the equity issue being outstanding. Please.
If I could just respond to that, I will tell you that I have received many concerns about transportation that I have, then passed on or tried to address from many constituents as well. So I'm hearing the same thing that you are discussing.
Well, thank you for reflecting what the Annapolis Education Commission has debated here. And I don't think anyone here is saying that mental health is not important and deserving of extra attention. That's not the message, but to pull back from money that has already been earmarked to helping to resolve these transportation inefficiencies seems like a false dichotomy. And we appreciate your attention to that. Okay, next we have, let's call it new business for right now. Janet, what do you have to add?
Well, I didn't know if we were going old business, new business.
What would you like? You want old business?
I want old business. I would love to get old business solved. So if you look in the text box on your right, if you open the chat panel, I have sent to you the link from the grade schools rating of Annapolis High. And if you can see that, you look down into the sources of information. We have a 2 out of 10 on our equity rating, which tanks our overall school rating to a 4 out of 10. And those of us who've recently been in Annapolis High know that we have some great administrators, great teachers, kids who are trying their best. And I don't think that outdated data that I've brought up repeatedly over the last 3 years, I think we've got to fix it. We have teachers from Annapolis High who are being siphoned off to the new Crofton High School because our lovely assistant principal went to Crofton High and is now recruiting the heck out of them. And we have people like Mr. Noga, our teacher of the year from Annapolis High, who's now left, and other people. So in order to recruit new teachers to Annapolis High, they're going to go on that grade schools rating, and we look awful on paper. And I am behooving, requesting, pleading that the school system instructional data people please provide the data to Annapolis High, to grade schools, so that they are not using 2015 and 2016 data for all the discipline issues, attendance, discipline, percent IB, all of it. They're using weight, percent suspended, percent chronically absent, percent 4-year grad rate. All of it is way outdated, and that just tanks our potential at Annapolis High.
So Jan, so you think that's outdated?
2014 data?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going on. We have a high suspension rate. We have a high exposure rate. We have a high attendance. I mean, all of that
Right.
hasn't
Well, yes,
been
I agree. It's probably not looking stellar, but I would like to see what it looks like. I think our graduation rate has crept up a little.
Oh yeah, they're graduating.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm not sure whether they should be, but they are graduating. But
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why grade schools have that information. I mean, they're getting it from somewhere, and I do see a lot of problems there at Annapolis High School. Like I said, that's been going on for years and years and years. So if you talk to different people in the community, you'll get different responses.
I know, and I do agree. I do agree with you there. And I think because we have that 2 out of 10 rating, it just proves that we have not addressed the opportunity gap at Annapolis High.
Exactly.
We have to do more, and you know, in the new committees that are being formed over the summer and stuff, you've got to get the input from parents and students about what needs to change. It can't just be the administrator's view. I mean, the young people across the country are telling you, they are telling you things that need to change, and we need to listen to them.
But it seems like the people, the committees are going to the same old people and getting the same old answers and same old results. They're not trying to reach out to the people who really have more input and have the answers, or maybe the answers. So if you keep talking to the same people all the time, and you're going to get the same result.
I agree.
I agree, Odessa, but I do think that Janet's point is really important, that AACPS needs to make sure that the information that is on great schools is the most up-to-date information. I just posted in the chat, the four-year high school graduation rate for Annapolis is from 2015. The percent taken college classes is from 2016. The percent taking IB is from 2016. Percent suspended is from 2016. A lot of things have changed in the last 4 years. I'm not saying that there aren't issues, but we can't as a group even make decisions if we're looking at information that's coming from 4 years ago, because those kids are 22
Yeah.
years old now.
Yeah,
know,
but can we get some more up-to-date information then from the
That's
the
what
board?
I think we're asking, is for
That's what I'm
AACPS
asking.
to make sure that the
AACPS to
information that is
provide.
out there on our schools is correct.
Right.
Laura and then Joanna.
I just wanted to quickly say to Jolynn on your equity committee, Kayla Golder, who's a member of this commission and is not here tonight. She's terrific. And she's a student at Anne Arundel High School. And I said this to her privately, but I'd like to say it to the group as well. I wish she was here tonight. She and her mother
Annapolis High School.
at
Yeah.
Annapolis High. Yeah, she and her mother both, because her mother attends the meetings as well, have provided really, really good insight into a lot of things that are going on in our communities that, you know, even though my son goes to Annapolis High, to some degree, he travels in a different circle. And a lot of the stuff that, you know, he says, oh yeah, this is what's going on in my classes. Kayla tells a very different story from her community. And it's been very eye-opening to me. And when we talk about equity issues, especially with what's going on now, I've been dwelling a lot on things that she has said here at our meetings. And I think she would be a terrific resource if you are looking for a student viewpoint on how equity issues were impacted, especially during the shutdown, you know, or the e-learning period. I think she would be great if you're looking for a student voice of what she sees in her community and how equity plays out.
Okay,
I agree,
Joanna, we're
Laura.
talking about greatschools.org data to you.
Yeah, I would just add another reason for updating the data, which is it's discouraging to the teachers and administrators who are trying to do some work in response to what's being presented to them to see this old data sitting there. I think the numbers may show improvement or in some areas and not improvement in others, and that's important to see. But for those who really are trying to do the job, I think it's discouraging not to see what they've been working so hard at being actually presented. So I think that's another part of the equation.
Okay, noted. I mean, for the record that, I mean, this subject has come up before, right? And nobody's accusing AACPS of malfeasance here. This Great Schools sucks in, they hoover in data from publicly available databases from all over the country, right? And this is what they have now. So we don't control, I mean, the county school system doesn't control what's going up to greatschools.org.
Right.
But every school can provide data to them. They encourage schools to update their information, and every single school can take ownership of the data.
That's
Right.
true,
They
but
only-
I'm sorry, that's true. But as I said, when we discussed this issue before, they're not going to take 1 year's data from Anne Arundel County Public Schools and 3 years older data or newer data from Howard County Public Schools and compare the two. right? That's the issue. If you look on their college readiness score, they took all that information from MSDE data.
Right,
So
but
that's
the
part of the
information that I just posted is different in Howard County and Montgomery County. If the school system doesn't provide the information, then they just use with whatever they can vacuum, as Jeff said. So if a school and a school system owns that, they claim that school and they provide the right information. I'm not like, for example, another besides Annapolis High School, Georgetown East, which has had amazing success in reducing the number of suspensions and issues like that over the last 3 years. Their numbers are from 2016, so they don't accurately reflect what's happening in that school. But that's a place where the school system actually can go in and provide that information to great schools to accurately show what's happening in our schools.
Okay, I think the message has gotten through to the Public Affairs Office. Any other discussion that we would call old business now?
Yeah, Jeff, I noticed that you had mentioned the SROs and that you took it off the agenda because I guess the board is not going to acknowledge, to speak about that. Can you give me more information about that?
Yeah, sure. We had gotten word that there might be some debate up at the school board level about the wisdom of keeping student resource officers in our secondary schools. It appears that that's not going to be the case, but if it were going to be raised up at the school board level, I wanted to get another temperature gauge from the commission members. We've had at least, I've been connected with this organization and its predecessor for about 15 years, and there's been a long-standing support for the stability that the SROs provide to our secondary schools. I wanted to make sure that the school board had a reading of the Annapolis Education Commission. I withdrew it for the sake of time, but if you'd like to bring up something about the SROs, Odessa, or have a discussion, we've got about 9 minutes left. This may be the time to do it. So, Odessa, over to you.
All right, well, it's just that I know that we depend heavily on the SROs, sometimes too much for the discipline. So I just want to make sure that, because, you know, like I was at the high school before they had the SROs, and we had many more fights than we have now. But you know, but since they're there, I just want to make sure that we don't establish too much of a school to prison pipeline, because if an SRO gets involved, then more than likely that they'll get a citation or they'll be taken down to the station or whatever like that. And then we don't want the kids to start building up a record. By the time they get out of high school, they can't get a decent job or something. I just, no, I would just like to analyze their roles and just exactly what the policy is for the SROs and what's going on with the students that they take out of the school down to the jail or to the police stations or whatever like that. What happens? I just don't know just how that works. Can someone tell me, you know, like when the student is taken out of the school, handcuffed and taken down to the police station, what happens? How, I mean, is that child getting a citation, or what is the role of the SROs as far as the you know, the pipeline?
Yeah, so let me see if I can do this real quick, given the hour. So once police get involved, it's police protocols that govern, right? So when they take a student, if a student is taken from the school to Southern District, let's just say, what happens from that point is totally the jurisdiction of the police department. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I can add on, Odessa, at Annapolis High School, Mr. Gelinas and the administrators meet with the SROs weekly to review some discipline incidents and reflect and plan for the future. So they are very aware of exactly the concern you just shared, and use great caution in engaging the SROs in student discipline issues, right? So there's student discipline issues, and then there are safety issues, right? And so as Mr. Mosier shared, when the SROs get involved, it is really up to them and the police department what happens. We do not recommend or advise on charges or how those things are handled. The structure at Annapolis High School in particular is really strong because the administration and those two SROs have such a amazing relationship and really work in tandem to do what is in the best interest of the student and the school at large. So it is a high functioning partnership at Annapolis High School, and we're lucky to have that.
If I could just add 2 more quick points. I just pasted a paragraph from Dr. Arlotto's most recent Capital Gazette column in the chat that addresses SROs, and he talks about the need to continue to refine and enhance the roles that the SROs play in our schools. But the second point is that I don't know how many of you got a chance to watch the Let's Talk Justice Student Forum that we held recently, but that question was the question about SROs and student attitudes toward SROs was posted by a member of the public in the YouTube chat and asked in that forum. And to a person in that forum, every student talked about the value that SROs bring to school buildings.
Yeah, but those students are, they don't get in trouble. I mean, I thought it was a great program. I mean, yeah, but I'm talking about kids that may overstep their boundaries and maybe swing at, they may be fighting, and then when the SRO breaks it up, if they punch the SRO, then the next thing you know, they handcuff and take it down to the police station. So, I mean, I've seen incidents happen at the school that I didn't agree with. One in particular was a student that was, the people were coming in the building talking about a student outside yelling and screaming. So I go outside to see what's going on. They had this young lady sitting on the damp ground because it had just rained, handcuffed behind her hands handcuffed behind her, and she was just yelling and screaming. Come find out that the girl has some mental problems. But the police officer had her sitting on the wet ground, handcuffed, the SRO standing there, and another county police officer standing out there with her. Now, why they were standing out there with her like that, I don't know. I mean, it was so embarrassing for the child. That child's rights was disrespected as far as I'm concerned, because she was sitting out there right in front of the building, everybody walking past her. So I mean, some of these things need to be addressed. I mean, I'm sure that the SROs are doing great. Yeah, they coach or whatnot, but they're getting paid to coach. It's not like they're doing it for free. I know a lot of people who would love from the community would love to come in there and coach, but they got the SROs coaching. But yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that we need to kind of like re-examine some of the policies, because we don't want this prison pipeline to continue. And that's what's been going on with our kids.
Thank you, Odessa. Any other comments on that issue, Janet?
I wanted to support Odessa's comments. Thank you, Odessa, for bringing that up. I would like to ask Bob and Jolynn, what's the structure within the high school to have teacher teams that come out to break up a fight? I mean, is it the pupil personnel workers? Who do you have within the building so that it's not automatically handed over to the police? And then some instances where, because you have the SRO in the building, we had 17 cop cars come flying down Riva Road and arrive at Annapolis High to quell a fight. But those people aren't trained. They don't know our kids. They might not, they're responding with more police tactic than the people in our schools. So I want to know how have we grown our own capacities within the school for teachers and pupil workers to be handling incidents with the kids that they know instead of turning it over to the police.
So at Annapolis High School, we're very blessed to have advocates, alternative one teachers whose job is primarily working with kids, right? They're in the halls, they're on the floors, they're walking the halls.
Football coach is one. right?
Mr. Starks works with our kids, right? So we have people walking the halls,
How many of those do we have?
working with children. It ebbs and flows from year to year, so I don't want to give you a wrong number. But we have, Mr. Sims. I know we at Annapolis Ed Commission maybe last year honored and recognized Mr. Sims. So we have those individuals, and so there is a structure at Annapolis High School where a teacher every teacher, in fact, I've attended the training, knows exactly how to get assistance if they need it, right? So if there's a conflict, whether that's physical or maybe even verbal and escalating, they know how to call for support. So it is the role of those individuals along with the administration to get involved when there's student conflict. In reality, Janet, when there's a safety situation, most adults are going to jump in to support. We do not require teachers to break up fights. They're obligated to get assistance and they're obligated to ask kids to stop, right? And so then it's the role of the administrator to determine if this is something so severe and serious, if the administrator is physically struggling and there's a real safety concern, they will call the SROs. Typically the SROs will hear things on the radio, they'll come, they'll respond, they'll stand back. And they'll only get involved if they need to.
But is it the administrator who decides that the SRO should get involved? Or
we're talking. It depends if we're talking about a situation that's violent and really clear versus a situation that involves, say, illegal substances and is handled in a much different manner, right? So. If the SRO sees a crime being committed, he certainly has the ability to become involved. But if possible, it's the administration that deals with it. And these are the situations. In fact, we had a training, I think it was right at the semester break, with all secondary principals and SROs, where we unpacked specific situations to try to norm the response. What does the SRO do here? What does the principal do? What do the APs do? When do we get our SROs involved so that we can really be consistent in what that looks like? They are split-second decisions. When the SROs make that decision to call for support, I am not certainly going to even begin to determine what goes into that decision-making. They're trained police officers and they make that decision. And when they push that button for help, they're going to get some help because that typically means they felt like they needed it. So that's ultimately their decision. We don't make that decision to say, hey, you need to call for more officers. They make that decision.
Thank you, Jolene. India, are you waiting to be recognized?
We can talk all we want about different stories, but what we really need is the actual statistics on how many kids are referred or arrested and the demographics of those. Well, they improve, it worse.
Okay, seeking statistics then. Okay. Anyone else on this subject here? Joanna, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had a similar question. I think it's important to have data that shows that SROs in fact keeps kids safer, because there's data put out by the ACLU and other places that says that is not the case. And also nationally, it's the case that when people are interviewed about do they like the SROs in their school, the answer is usually yes. But when people, as with all surveys, it matters what questions you ask. When families are told, well, there's some other ways of thinking about safety, then you get very different responses. Most families assume this is the only way to keep kids safe in school. So I would just suggest going forward, it's worth thinking about, to India's point, getting statistics and data. But also, this is a matter of determining where we put resources, right? I mean, we have 2 SROs at Annapolis High, I think. We have one social worker. ultimately that all comes out of the county budget in one way or another. And so data is what should inform, I would think, how we use our resources. So I would just throw that into the conversation.
Okay, Janet, we've reached our appointed hour. You've got the last word.
Okay, I just want to remind people that at the last Board of Ed budget hearing, Annapolis PTA requested from the Board of Ed that we needed an additional social worker for the school. We have one social worker for 2,100 kids. The higher priority was also an additional assistant principal position, and the community ambassador positions and pupil personnel workers. So that's the kind of response team that could hopefully take care of some of these student fight incidents and be able to respond in a fashion that we would find more acceptable and prevent things. So I do want to remind you, PTASA went on record for that request, and that has not been met.
Thank you, Janet. Unfortunately, we've run out of time here. I'd love to continue on with this discussion. We can defer it till our next meeting. Last item on the agenda is our next meeting date. Historically, we've taken off the month of July. Also, this June meeting has been delayed due to some technical issues with the city. I'd like to move that we delay our next meeting until the first Monday in August, and we'll be back on our regular meeting schedule at that time. Are there any objections to that? One objection.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Rodvian had mentioned that the conflict with county council. Are we taking any of that into account with the scheduling of our meetings?
Our standing meeting for years has been the first Monday of the month, and that is due
But
to
it's
the
a whole
fact
new
that
era.
it did not conflict with any other PTA meetings. I asked Brianna to look into an alternative date. If there is a move now that we have clearance from the city to change our dates, if there is an interest on the part of our commission members, Janet, if you'd like to get on that committee with Brianna, that would be a great help. Is there anyone else who'd like to get on that committee? Okay, so Brianna and Janet, if you would try to come up with some alternate dates, and the goal would be to avoid city council, county council, Board of Education meetings, and all the PTA meetings in the cluster. If we can find a better time to meet, then I'm certainly open to anything. So I'll leave that up to you. Motion on the floor here is to make our next meeting the first Monday in August. Are there any objections to that? If there are no objections, thanks everybody for participating. We appreciate it. Councilman Rodvian, we appreciate your presence here. Our two candidates for the Board of Education, thank you very much for your interest and engagement in the local school system. Laura, I'm going to recess right now, and if anyone else wants to hang out for a few minutes afterwards, then we can do that.
Jeff,
Okay.
I had new business that I put up on the chat, and I've been trying to let people know about. I don't know of any place in city code where it says we have to end at 7:30. I know it says we have to start at 6, but the Future History Now is working with the Banneker Douglas Museum to try to install a new a mural in the pavement area of the car rider lane at Annapolis Middle School. The PTSA is in support of this. Banneker Douglas and Future History Now are in support of this as well. It has gone to AACPS. We have not heard any response as far as I'm aware yet, but I just want to let all of you know, because it's a really great idea that Future History Now and the Banneker Douglas Museum have to put a mural. It's a Black Lives Matter mural, and they want to involve students in getting there and doing a safe and socially distant creation of this mural that will speak to all of the students. And it's actually in a space that it's so big that you'll be able to see it from space satellites, which is cool. But anyway, I just wanted to let you all know about that. I can send some information out and some of the drawings that have been submitted. We would love your support in this project because it is a really fantastic concept, and just would mean a lot, I think, to the population, to all of our students at Annapolis Middle.
Hey,
Enid,
I think it's a great idea, and I hope we all can support that. And I just wanted to add earlier, when you called Grace Matthews, she's supposed to be going through the process, but she lost her sister, which is why she's not on board tonight.
well, we're very sorry for that, and we lift her up and wish her the best in these trying times. I have a motion to close.
I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned.
Okay, second? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, nay? Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate your interest in public education in our capital city, and our next meeting will be the first Monday night, 6 p.m., likely via Zoom, electronic meetings from 6 to 7:30. Thanks very much and have a good night.